with City Team. We're here with Caleb Southerland, and he is the Vice President of City Team DMM Americas. And we're going to get to know him in the next couple of minutes through this video blog and podcast. And welcome, Caleb.
Thank you.
So, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to City Team.
Yeah, I'm a Texan, born and raised. Spent my whole life there, grew up there. Went and had kind of a stint in Washington, D.C., where I felt God pulling me into ministry. And when I started going through those kind of motions, I went back to Dallas to go to seminary. Went to Dallas Seminary, spent 4 years there. Halfway through, decided God was calling me to plant a brick-and-mortar church. So I planted a brick-and-mortar church. We're what we called a missional church with the Acts 29 network. And we saw some really neat things happen. We saw lives change. We had baptisms. We saw what we say boys become men and take on responsibility for what they needed to. But honestly, one of the things that we didn't see was the spiritual landscape of our city completely change. And so I left there, went out to San Francisco, kind of went in the corporate world for a little bit. And as I was out in San Francisco, God began to really mess with my heart in what it looked like to actually change a city. Not just have a good church service, but what does it look like to change a city? And I kept on trying to invite my coworkers and family to church, and they didn't want to come, and I couldn't understand that because I loved church stuff. But as we started going through it, realized that, it was more Christ that I needed to lead people to, not the church. And so we started what we called Discovery Bible Studies that I had kind of read about and learned about and heard David Watson speak about and saw it really work. And so as I was out here in San Francisco working in corporate world, seeing some of those things happen, Paul Watson called me and said, hey, why don't you help me launch this in the Pacific Northwest? And so I jumped on board. I actually moved back to Dallas just to raise funds and started working there and saw some really neat things happen. So we started making disciples in and around the Dallas-Fort Worth area. It jumped to Houston and Oklahoma City, and so we started seeing it kind of move around. And then City Team called me and said, hey, would you be interested in coming on board and kind of leading this vision of the Americas? And to be honest, I really prayed about it because what I wanted was a calling in a place where it could just further what I believe God was doing in and through my heart. So City Team was an amazing platform to see us reach the Americas. And how do we get disciple-making movements inside of the urban sectors? So.
And that was a little bit less than a year ago.
It was about 7 or 8 months ago right now.
So you're heading up a team across the United States now that are doing exactly what you're doing, and a movement is happening. And so not a lot of people understand. City Team is a 60-year-old ministry. We care for the poor, but we care for people, whether it's their spirituality or their physical, mental being. And so discipleship is very important to our core values and to our mission statement. And that is why we wanted to focus on, can we have a movement happen across the United States and jump to other places? And so not a lot of people understand what is disciple-making movements. And can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's probably the most asked question that we get. One of the things I love about City Team is that they seek the physical and spiritual renewal of a city. And so what I love about disciple-making movements is that we don't start with churches. We actually start with making disciples. How do we help just ordinary people fall in love with Jesus and begin to follow what he does? And replication is one of those big things that you can't just learn something in your head. You actually have to do it. You actually have to take it. You actually have to transform with it. And so disciple-making movements is going at the simplest form in working inside of communities just for one-on-one and in individuals to begin to make disciples, to begin to grow in their understanding and affection for who God is and what he's done, and begin to take that into their communities, into their neighborhoods. So we don't just see a conversion, we actually see a transformation. And we actually see an entire city begin to just replicate and begin to emerge out of it. So disciple-making movements really starts with the simplest form creating what we call embryonic churches, kind of what's it look like to begin to foster this. Rather than pull people out of their world, we actually let the gospel go into their world.
And with the decline of churches and millennials and such a high percentage of people that don't know God or know his love, I mean, this is so crucial to the fabric of America. And I'm sure that you're out there paving the way for people to understand this.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you go to any Christian bookstore and read through some of the titles, you'll read books like They Love Jesus But They Don't Like the Church, or How to Get Men to Go to Church, or any of these questions that we realize that there's this massive decline of not only church attendance, but even kind of chasing after God. And it's because people have never seen a way that is not church. It is just running after who Jesus is. And so we haven't done a good job of clearly articulating what that is. And so what the iDisciple team, what we call our team that's all over the Americas, is doing is how do we train leaders? How do we catalyze movements? How do we invite people to be in on this bigger story of allowing ordinary people to fall in love with Jesus in their own living room, in their own house, in their own workplace, and at the gym, and then begin to create communities that become churches?
And it's more about that relationship with God rather than building a church building. And you need to meet them wherever they are, whether they're in a homeless shelter or in a recovery program or underneath a bridge or in the gym, like you said, or a coffee shop. And we're all called
Absolutely.
to this mission that God wanted for us, to love our neighbors so much that you wanted them to have a relationship with Jesus.
It keeps taking us back to the two big commissions and the two greats that Jesus gave us. How do you love God and love your neighbor as yourself? And then how do you go and make disciples all over the world? And so realizing that that's all of our call, is to go and make disciples. How do we not make Christians? How do we not make kind of just our cultures that we like, but how do we actually make disciples? And so what I love about what's happening right now is we're seeing it in recovery centers. We're seeing it just ordinary people jumping on board. We're seeing it with young families and couples. We're even seeing mega churches going, we're in love with this. We want to see this happen. How do we get this into the core of who we are? And so we're beginning to see the DMM DNA, as we call it, the elements, really kind of move into every element of a city.
Yeah, that is really exciting when churches are knocking on our door saying, show us the way, city team, because we really want to see that happen in our community. So can you tell us any more about how it's launching across America? And I hear about your new training center opening in Dallas. That's exciting.
Yeah, some of the things that we've really focused in on is there for a while we were kind of just spreading out and trying to train as many people as possible.
Right.
And we realized that what we didn't do a good job of was really coming down and centralizing the idea of training. How are we training? How can people get a hold of it? Really giving them some tangible handles on what we're doing. But also, how do we create infrastructure and culture and systems and teams across? So what we've done is we've kind of centralized a training center in Dallas, Texas. And so we will have what we call level 1, just kind of intro trainings, and then we'll have leadership trainings, and then really guys who want to run with it, strategic elements and strategic training. And so we have different levels of training that people can be a part of there. And then we've really focused in on 3 core metropolitan areas to go, what's it look like to go deep in these areas and develop the infrastructure needed? And so the Bay Area out here in California, and then centralized right in Dallas-Fort Worth, my hometown, and then Philadelphia, where, again, one of our city team recovery centers is. We have the leadership. We have some core DNA already built there, and we've seen some groups and starting to see that second and third generation pop up in certain areas. And so we are really honing in and going, okay, can we create a model that then could replicate to all the other cities across the U.S. and maybe even urban cities around the world? And so it really is in this stage of growing deep as well as wide.
It's really unique right now that at this point in City Team, we're really investing in Americas, and we want to see this. We have a desire that God wants this to happen across America. That's exciting.
Not too long ago, I was at a coffee shop and I saw this guy, and we kind of made weird eye contact, and I could tell, he was pretty new to our country. Began to talk to him and found out he wouldn't tell me exactly, but he kind of let on that he was Southeast Asian. And as we began to have the conversation, he made the comment that his church had sent him to America to be a missionary because America's lost. And I remember going, that's not how it works. We send people all over the world. And it really, God used that to go, America needs missionaries. We need people that go in and want to see the spiritual landscape of our cities changed. We want to see people that go in and say, we need to see renewal. Just like we send missionaries all over the world, what's it look like to send missionaries into the core of our cities to see them transform? So we really are. We're focused on the Americas. We're really focused on the United States and how do we change the urban cities where spirituality is incredibly broken right now, where the relational fabric is really just spread apart and broken. And so we're really going in and going, how do we create communities? How do we see some spiritual change?
And that transformation of a city is going to happen as well, because the church used to be that central location where people would get services and connect with people. And if that is dwindling away, where are people
exactly
are getting that? And if we can put missionaries on the ground in all of these locations and start these movements, that eventually you will see a community transformed.
Exactly.
Less violence, loving thy neighbor. Because a lot of people don't understand, how do I love God and how do I love my neighbor? Yep. Who is my neighbor? And that will transform a street, a city, a state. It's a big task.
Exactly. We look forward to the day that we really we run out of a job, because the city looks completely, what we like to say, more like heaven and less like hell. And even the tangible things where we make comments when we go into a city, what would it look like to actually leave your laptop in the car and not worry if it's going to get broken into? What would it look like for your kids to be able to play outside in the front yard because you don't have to be scared anymore? Because the gospel was so transformative inside of your neighborhood. That we see not only better churches, but lives changed and cities transformed.
So how can people keep up to date with what's happening in this division of City Team?
Yeah, we have two main ways, two streams of communication. One is iDisciple.com. If you want to go to that website, there's a lot of information there, where our teams are, how you could get started on your journey, how you could, invest in what we're doing. It really gives a clear picture, even how to just follow up with us. And then Facebook. If you go to Facebook, there's the iDisciple group on Facebook that you can go and follow. And it really keeps you up to speed on where our trainings are, what's happening with our teams, people you can connect with, books that we're reading, just all of those things to kind of follow along. What is this team doing? What's happening? What is God deciding to do through them? And you can look in and follow us on there.
What a huge investment. Thank you, Caleb, for hearing God's call to come to City Team and focus specifically on this. I mean, it's a huge undertaking, and it's going to make a great impact for the kingdom.
Absolutely. Thank you.